mugger, aren't you? Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in this green world you happen to be. I'm Tad. I will be here for a little while. As I've mentioned a few times, I will probably not be here super long tonight because it's only a single story and it's not a super long story. And that's true for tomorrow's as well, I think. But those are the last two stories in the book. So we will then be done with the Martian Chronicles and be on to something else, although I'm not exactly sure what at this point. Yeah, sorry, don't mind me. I'm just adjusting my light there. Anyway, so hello, good to see you. Oh my goodness. All right. So what has happened since last week? Well, the main news, I guess, is that we have this is family domestic news, of course. Other than the fact that we're having a family birthday coming up in the next, well, actually tomorrow, not tomorrow, but tomorrow, Monday. We are having a family birthday, but we are also, I guess, bringing in a new dog, which I know seems rather soon, but we realized that, or this is in part not realized in the sense of like revelation. We've been talking about it, but that Big Dog Johnny has never been a solitary dog. He's always used to having other dogs, and more than that, he's used to when we go out, he has a dog as a companion. When we go out of town, he has at least one other dog as a companion. So we decided that really, for a number of reasons, it would be best to bring in another dog so that we have time to reconcile them and get them used to each other and hopefully to be buddies by the time that we have to start doing traveling this spring, which we do and will. So that is the basic plan. So we have not brought the new dog home yet, but we did in fact make arrangements to adopt her. She is a rescue, of course. That is where we're pretty devotedly putting our pet energy in the last many years. All of our most recent dogs have been rescues, and this one is no exception. I will spare you telling you much about her until we get her home. She's very mellow, very sweet. She's kind of probably largely bull terrier, what are commonly called pit bull. She's probably got some other stuff in her too. We don't know much about her background, but she's very calm, far calmer than Johnny, and we hope that that will be a good match, and maybe even some of it will rub off on Mr. Jonathan. Her name at the adoption place or the Humane Society place or whatever is Lemon Drop, but we don't know if we're going to keep that. That was a name given to her in the shelter, so we don't know if we'll keep that or if that will become part of her eventual name. So again, this is all very preliminary. We just sort of went through this whole thing over the last few days, and we were kind of, keeping it on hold, and then we found out that she was still available and that nobody had adopted her, and Deb had already met her once and kind of fell for her. So that's the main news, and I'm sure there will be many adjustments. When Johnny first met her, he was rather alarmed and thought she was coming up to jump us or something. So his first response to her was not a very kind one. But then they kind of mellowed out and just largely hung out in the same general area. And she was obviously very sensible. So that's that piece of news. We will let you know more about it as it goes along. I'm sure there are going to be many twists and turns to the new adoption process as we get these critters used to each other and reconstitute the family order such as it is. Not that it's been bad having Johnny just as a solitary dog, and it's certainly my work as dog caretaker has been much easier because, of course, I haven't had to do all the things we had to do with Walter, which was constant medication and trying to connive him into eating and, all this kind of stuff. So I haven't minded only having one dog from a work-life balance sort of point of view. But not only are we used to having several dogs, we peaked out at 4, but that felt fairly reasonable at the time. But as I said, Johnny's always had a dog companion, and we were a little worried about, how we could go away or do anything, especially because our house sitters can't be home all the time. So anyway, a lot of this and that's. But as I said, we will, as Miss Lucy or Miss Lulu or Miss Lemon Drop or whatever she winds up being called, we tend to give our dogs people names. That just became a habit way back when, and we've sort of carried it on ever since. So it remains to be seen whether Lemon Drop will stick. It's a little too twee for me, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, but she is a sweetie, and we're optimistic about how things are going to go. I am, of course, still working on The Splintered Sun. I actually had a really good stretch where I did like 30-something pages in 3 days, and then the last 24 hours or so, I haven't been able to get anything done, in part because of prepping for a new dog moving in. But it's coming along. I feel like I've licked most of the problems with it. We shall see. It's always a process, and especially when you're starting something new. And as I've explained several times, this is new because even though it takes place in Oostenryd and there are some familiar historical bits and stuff like that, it's a little bit more than 200 years before the Dragonbone Chair, so it's a different place, and the characters are all new, or almost all of them are new. One character is not new, but all the rest are new. And, and it's also kind of more of an ensemble piece than some of my others, so I'm having to balance a whole big character, what's the word I'm looking for? Pantheon? That's a bit dramatic. But anyway, so working on that. Deb is working on her various projects, and also trying to do things like, with the help of many of our friends, trying to get the newsletters out and stuff like that. Cats, as you may have heard when we first brought up the microphone, the cats are having a lot of complaints tonight about the service. They think there should be more treats and more often. So they were, just as I was getting ready to start, they were making a lot of noise and letting me know that things were not running with the sort of way that they had come to expect. Cats always have complaints. It's the nature of cats. What else? Anything else? Just the usual, just working, being boring, we're now through the holiday seasons, except for we have still some birthdays to come up. But other than that, things are good. No complaints, no nada. Just trying to find time to get work done. That's always my struggle. And as I've mentioned before, part of it is because I need to think before I sit down to work, so I don't even usually sit down at the keyboard until in the afternoon sometime, because I've spent the earlier part of the day thinking about what I'm going to work on, but I need that time. And there's always something these days going on that seems to disrupt that. It's one of the reasons I still haven't dealt with The Office. It's always a struggle between, going, okay, now I have a few hours free, what am I going to do? I can either start whittling away at this project over here, or I can do this thing that I need to do over here, or I can deal with this emergency situation that just came up over here, or I can actually maybe ignore all those other things that are calling for my attention and actually work on my book. And so it's always an interesting struggle of competing interests. And I do sometimes envy those of my writing. Well, they're not peers, obviously, because they're making more money than I am, but those of my contemporaries in the writing field who can afford to have people to take care of this stuff for them. But that's not the case for Deb and I, which is not a complaint. which is not a complaint. We have been fortunate enough to make a living doing something we love for decades, and no complaints about that. But it does mean that a lot of the stuff like answering mail and getting things sent to people and all this stuff just kind of can get buried in the, in all the other stuff that has to be dealt with. And so anyway, so that's my news such as it is. The main news, dog on the horizon. It sounds like a title for something. Dog on the horizon. There's a dog on the horizon who's probably going to arrive, or we're going to go pick up tomorrow. And working on Splintered Sun, and I think the first printing of Navigator's Children has sold out, which is good news and very pleasing. Excuse me. And so I'm going to check in and see who all. That content is not available, that page says, so let's look at the other page. And there we go. All right, good. So let me check in and see. And first off the bat on the comments, I see my beloved mother-in-law, Hazel. Hello, sweetie. How you doing? Your daughter is fine. I assume you heard the dog news, if not from her. You've now heard it from me, but we're all doing well there, and we send our love to everybody on your end. And please give everybody smooches for us. Isaac's here, and Isaac says it's very cold. Sandra says, best way to start a Sunday. Have you considered religion? Christina says she has started the Navigator's Children, and I, of course, am very pleased to hear that. That always makes me happy. Who else has checked in? Dirk, hello. Wouter, good to see you. Petra, also. Maria Jose, good to have you with us. Suzanne. Ilva, darling, I'll get you a wing at some point. That I know that's cryptic for the rest of you, but don't worry about it. Christian Fabricius, hello, sir. Good to see you. Sandra, hello. Mahmoud, good to have you. Rosalba, same. Iris, same. Ivan, Mil Drugi, good to see you, mate. Christy, hello. Carol, hello. Good to see you. Nicole, and the ubiquitous and two more. I have no idea. My old friend Mark has showed up and says, I need another bat-eared thing. There is a blast from the past. Mark is referring to way back in the earliest days of social media. Mark and I and others were on the Genie message board. That was GE. And we, of course, had all kinds of ongoing conversations and jokes and stuff. And one of them was that I started talking about my then dog, Wolfgang, who was a papillon. And if you don't know what papillons are, they have huge ears that are kind of like fuzzy and frilly and tasseled, but they have gigantic ears. They're small dogs with a very big personality. And we started calling Wolfgang the bat-eared thing, and the BET. And that caught on and became like a running subject of jokes for years and years and years. And he was a pretty amazingly cool dog, tiny little thing. I mean, probably weighed 8 pounds, 9 pounds, something like that. Bigger than the late lamented Walter, but not very big. And he actually fought off 2 raccoons. And anybody who's lived with raccoons, whether in California or Germany or anywhere, knows that is an impressive feat, especially for a really small dog. Now, he did get a broken leg doing it, but he fought off 2 raccoons, both of which were bigger than him, both of which were wild animals. So the bat-eared thing, salute. He was a brave dude for a little cranky little guy. So anyway, and there's Jay. Hello, Jay. Good to see you too. That's Jay Sheckley, my dear friend and one of the world's finest booksellers and just all around good people. So lovely to see Jay too. And okay, so with all of that said and done, and having checked in with everybody, and since we are on live, and since I probably won't have a whole long story to read tonight, I am going to start reading because I have dilly-dallied enough. And this is, as I said several times, this is one of my very favorite stories, and certainly one of my favorite stories. These last 2 stories are probably 2 of my maybe 3 favorite stories in the Martian Chronicles, which, as I have also said many times, was a huge influence on me in many, many ways. Obviously, not just the obvious thing, which, the Bradbury's love of language and all that, although that also obviously is there. Tom Robbins, actually. I went through a real strong phase of reading Tom Robbins books. Most of you will only know him perhaps for Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, but Another Roadside Attraction was the first thing of his that I read, and Still Life with Woodpecker and a bunch of others. But like Bradbury, Tom Robbins is a writer who is absolutely drunk on language. I mean, really, damn near sort of 1960s, early 70s James Joyce hippie kind of thing. Hard to explain, but very amusing. Anyway, but so Bradbury, not only the language was important for me and was something that struck me, but and I've mentioned the Martians, because Bradbury's Martians are probably more similar to my Scythie than Tolkien's elves were, at least in terms of how they arose in my mind. But also, and this is also something that there's a commonality with Tolkien, there's a definite sadness. There is a definite feeling of mortality and time and the wheel of change and all that stuff that runs through the Martian Chronicles, which was a very strong thing for me when I was a kid. These are, when you're a kid, unless you know somebody you know dies, the whole concept of mortality is kind of something that you mainly grasp from like television and things like that, or you hear about somebody famous, like, when Kennedy was assassinated when I was a very young kid. But generally, these feelings of mortality, you bring them in from other sources if you don't suffer losses yourself. And I think for me, the Martian Chronicles was definitely one of those early books that, because it is so suffused with regret and with the feeling of, because, both the humans, as you'll see, and obviously the Martians, that these are civilizations which have gone past their prime in a sense, and the Martians are essentially gone, or mostly gone at this point, if not entirely gone. And the humans, as we heard in the previous last couple of stories, the humans have now all gone back to Earth, or most of them have, because of a war, which is supposed to be a nuclear war. So this whole kind of feeling of loss and fragility and all that is a very, very strong part of the Martian Chronicles. And I think it's also one of the things that struck me very strongly when I was young. And it has persisted through my own work. And I won't bother to sum it up, citations of where, but I mean, I think anybody who is a reader of mine has seen this feeling of that loss is inevitable. It's part of what mortality brings us, both good and bad. Tolkien wrestled with it, but Tolkien had a religious belief to fall back on, which is why he carefully exempted humankind, or men, from the fate of the elves and others and their seeming immortality. And Tolkien was basically advertising the lot of humans as being somehow both inferior and superior to that of the immortals. But I don't happen to believe in, I don't have a religious foundation that tells me that immortality is real. You just have to die to get there. So as a result, all I have is the earthly senses that I am given. And, when, like in the last few years, when I have lost several people who are very dear to me, I don't have a belief that we will be reintroduced someday, that we will be, rejoin each other in heaven, or, Valhalla or Nirvana, or, anything. That my old dogs will all come running up to me, much as I'd love it, much as I love seeing my parents and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents and all my dogs and cats. It's not something that I would bet the ranch on. But I do know that what we have is what we have, and that we have to appreciate it, and we have to live in the now. So with that in mind, and that general thought on mortality, I will now read from the Martian Chronicles. And this is a story that has been given a date of August 2057, so 20 something years after most of the things that have happened in this collection so far, but only a short time after the last story that we read. August 2057. There will come soft rains. In the living room, the voice clock sang, "Tick-tock, 7 o'clock, time to get up, 7 o'clock," as if it were afraid that nobody would. The morning house lay empty. The clock ticked on, repeating and repeating its sounds into the emptiness. 7-9, breakfast time, 7-9. In the kitchen, the breakfast stove gave a hissing sigh and ejected from its warm interior 8 pieces of perfectly browned toast, 8 eggs sunny side up, 16 slices of bacon, 2 coffees, and 2 cool glasses of milk. "Today is August 4th, 2057, said a second voice from the kitchen ceiling, "in the city of Allendale, California." It repeated the date 3 times for memory's sake. "Today is Mr. Featherstone's birthday. Today is the anniversary of Talita's marriage. Insurance is payable, as are the water, gas, and light bills." Somewhere in the walls, relays clicked, memory tapes glided under electric eyes. 8-1, tick-tock, 8-1 o'clock, off to school, off to work, run, run, 8-1. But no doors slammed. No carpets took the soft tread of rubber heels. It was raining outside. The weather box on the front door sang quietly, "Rain, rain, go away, rubbers, raincoats for today," and the rain tapped on the empty house, echoing. Outside, the garage chimed and lifted its door to reveal the waiting car. After a long wait, the door swung down again. At 8:30, the eggs were shriveled, and the toast was like stone. An aluminum wedge scraped them into the sink, where hot water whirled them down a metal throat, which digested and flushed them away to the distant sea. The dirty dishes were dropped into a hot washer and emerged twinkling dry. 9:15, sang the clock. "Time to clean." Out of warrens in the wall, tiny robot mice darted. The rooms were acrawl with the small cleaning animals, all rubber and metal. They thudded against chairs, whirling their mustached runners, kneading the rug nap, sucking gently at hidden dust. Then, like mysterious invaders, they popped into their burrows. Their pink electric eyes faded. The house was clean. 10 o'clock. The sun came out from behind the rain. The house stood alone in a city of rubble and ashes. This was the one house left standing. At night, the ruined city gave off a radioactive glow which could be seen for miles. 10:15. The garden sprinklers whirled up in golden founts, filling the soft morning air with scatterings of brightness. The water pelted window panes, running down the charred west side where the house had been burned evenly free of its white paint. The entire west face of the house was black, save for 5 places. Here, the silhouette in paint of a man mowing a lawn. Here, as in a photograph, a woman bent to pick flowers. Still farther over, their images burned on wood in one titanic instant. A small boy, hands flung into the air. Higher up, the image of a thrown ball, and opposite him a girl, hands raised to catch a ball, which never came down. The 5 spots of paint, the man, the woman, the children, the ball, remained. The rest was a thin, charcoal layer. The gentle sprinkler rain filled the garden with falling light. Until this day, how well the house had kept its peace. How carefully it had inquired, "Who goes there? What's the password?" And getting no answer from lonely foxes and whining cats, it had shut up its windows and drawn shades in an old maidenly preoccupation with self-protection which bordered on a mechanical paranoia. It quivered at each sound, the house did. If a sparrow brushed a window, the shade snapped up. The bird, startled, flew off. No, not even a bird must touch the house. The house was an altar with 10,000 attendants, big, small, servicing, attending, in choirs. But the gods had gone away, and the ritual of the religion continued, senselessly, uselessly. 12 noon. A dog whined, shivering on the front porch. The front door recognized the dog voice and opened. The dog, once huge and fleshy but now gone to bone and covered with sores, moved in and through the house, tracking mud. Behind it whirled angry mice, angry at having to pick up mud, angry at inconvenience. For not a leaf fragment blew under the door, but what the wall panels flipped open, and the copper scrap rats flashed swiftly out. The offending dust, hair, or paper, seized in miniature steel jaws, was raced back to the burrows. There, down tubes which fed into the cellar, it was dropped into the sighing vent of an incinerator, which sat like evil Baal in a dark corner. The dog ran upstairs, hysterically yelping to each door, at last realizing, as the house realized, that only silence was here. It sniffed the air and scratched the kitchen door. Behind the door, the stove was making pancakes, which filled the house with a rich baked odor and the scent of maple syrup. The dog frothed at the mouth, lying at the door, sniffing, its eyes turned to fire. It ran wildly in circles, biting at its tail, spun in a frenzy, and died. It lay in the parlor for an hour. 2 o'clock, sang a voice. Delicately sensing decay at last, the regiments of mice hummed out as softly as blown gray leaves in an electrical wind. 2:15. The dog was gone. In the cellar, the incinerator glowed suddenly, and a whirl of sparks leaped up the chimney. 2:35. Bridge tables sprouted from patio walls. Playing cards fluttered onto pads in a shower of pips. Martinis manifested on an oaken bench with egg salad sandwiches. Music played. But the tables were silent, and the cards untouched. At 4 o'clock, the tables folded like great butterflies back through the paneled walls. 4:30. The nursery walls glowed. Animals took shape. Yellow giraffes, pink antelopes, blue lions, lilac panthers, cavorting in crystal substance. The walls were glass. They looked out upon color and fantasy. Hidden films clocked through well-oiled sprockets, and the walls lived. The nursery floor was woven to resemble a crisp cereal meadow. Over this ran aluminum roaches and iron crickets, and in the hot, still air, butterflies of delicate red tissue wavered among the sharp aroma of animal spores. There was the sound like a great matted yellow hive of bees within a dark bellows, the lazy bumble of a purring lion. And there was the patter of okapi feet and the murmur of a fresh jungle rain, like other hoofs, falling upon the summer-starched grass. Now the walls dissolved into distances of parched weed, mile on mile, and warm, endless sky. The animals drew away into thorn breaks and water holes. It was the children's hour. 5 o'clock. The bath filled with clear, hot water. 6, 7, 8 o'clock. The dinner dishes manipulated like magic tricks, and in the study a click. In the metal stand opposite the hearth, where a fire now blazed up warmly, a cigar popped out, half an inch of soft gray ash on it, smoking, waiting. 9 o'clock. The beds warmed their hidden circuits, for nights were cool here. 9:05. A voice spoke from the study ceiling. Mrs. McClellan, which poem would you like this evening? The house was silent. The voice said at last, Since you express no preference, I shall select a poem at random. Quiet music rose to back the voice. Sarah Teasdale, as I recall, your favorite. There will come soft rains, and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pools singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. And not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone. The fire burned on the stone hearth, and the cigar fell away into a mound of quiet ash on its tray. The empty chairs faced each other between the silent walls, and the music played. At 10 o'clock, the house began to die. The wind blew. A falling tree bough crashed through the kitchen window. Cleaning solvent bottled shattered over the stove. The room was ablaze in an instant. Fire! Screamed a voice. The house lights flashed. Water pumps shot water from the ceilings. But the solvent spread on the linoleum, licking, eating, under the kitchen door, while the voices took it up in chorus. Fire! 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 The house tried to save itself. Doors sprang tightly shut, but the windows were broken by the heat, and the wind blew and sucked upon the fire. The house gave ground as the fire in 10 billion angry sparks moved with flaming ease from room to room and then up the stairs, while scurrying water rats squeaked from the walls, pistoled their water and ran for more, and the wall sprays let down showers of mechanical rain. But too late. Somewhere, sighing, a pump shrugged to a stop. The quenching rain ceased. The reserve water supply, which had filled baths and washed dishes for many quiet days, was gone. The fire crackled up the stairs. It fed upon Picassos and Matisses in the upper halls like delicacies, baking off the oily flesh, tenderly crisping the canvases into black shavings. Now the fire lay in beds, stood in windows, changed the colors of the drapes. And then reinforcements. From attic trapdoors, blind robot faces peered down with faucet mouths gushing green chemical. The fire backed off, as even an elephant must at the sight of a dead snake. Now there were 20 snakes whipping over the floor, killing the fire with a clear, cold venom of green froth. But the fire was clever. It had sent flames outside the house, up through the attic to the pumps there. An explosion. The attic brain which directed the pumps was shattered into bronze shrapnel on the beams. The fire rushed back into every closet and felt of the clothes hung there. The house shuddered, oak bone on bone, its bared skeleton cringing from the heat, its wires, its nerves revealed as if a surgeon had torn the skin off to let the red veins and capillaries quiver in the scalded air. Help! Help! Fire! Run! Run! Heat snapped mirrors like the brittle winter ice, and the voices wailed, Fire! Fire! Run! Run! Like a tragic nursery rhyme. A dozen voices, high, low, like children dying in a forest, alone, alone, and the voices fading as the wires popped their sheathings like hot chestnuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 voices died. In the nursery, the jungle burned. Blue lions roared, purple giraffes bounded off. The panthers ran in circles, changing color, and 10 million animals running before the fire vanished off toward a distant, steaming river. 10 more voices died. In the last instant under the fire avalanche, other choruses, oblivious, could be heard announcing the time, playing music, cutting the lawn by remote control mower, or setting an umbrella frantically out in the slamming and opening front door. 1,000 things happening, like a clock shop, when each clock strikes the hour insanely before or after the other, a scene of maniac confusion. Yet unity. Singing, screaming, a few last cleaning mice darting bravely out to carry the horrid ashes away. And one voice, with sublime disregard for the situation, read poetry aloud in the fiery study until all the film spools burned, until all the wires withered and the circuits cracked. The fire burst the house and let it slam flat down, puffing out skirts of spark and smoke. In the kitchen, an instant before the rain of fire and timber, the stove could be seen making breakfast at a psychopathic rate. 10 dozen eggs, 6 loaves of toast, 20 dozen bacon strips, which, eaten by fire, started the stove working again, hysterically hissing. The crash. The attic smashing into kitchen and parlor. The parlor into cellar. Cellar into deep subcellar. Deep freeze, armchair, film tape, circuits, beds, and all, like skeletons thrown in a cluttered mound deep under. Smoke and silence, a great quantity of smoke. Within the wall, a last voice said, over and over again and again, even as the sun rose to shine upon the heaped rubble and steam, "Today is August 5th, 2057. Today is August 5th, 2057. Today is..." And that is the end of that story. And let me just mark that for next time. Again, for lack of a better term, I apologize. I can't really make these things work out perfectly. I'm sorry that these last two story sessions are short, but I did want to do one per night. And I also think both of these last stories are worth kind of isolating a little bit to listen to and to think about. So I won't tell you too many of my own thoughts. I think the substance of the story we just read is pretty clear. It's pretty plain. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that Bradbury was writing was in the height of the Cold War. And that Cold War permeates the Martian Chronicles because, of course, what they're worried about and what actually makes most of the Martian colonists go back to Earth is the atomic war beginning on Earth. Not every single person on Mars, as we've seen and will see in the last story, but definitely, the idea is that it has emptied the colonies and that they have all gone back to Earth and that things have not gone well on Earth, as we see in that last story. But I think more importantly, and I think this actually has some bearing on some of the things I talked about with Bradbury. One of the things that, as I said, that I've always really responded to with Bradbury is that his science fiction was not necessarily about science. He was not trying to correctly guess the future, as is usually the case with science fiction. He was writing about his own time, his own concerns, the things that he saw happening in front of him. So not about science per se, but if anything, the scientific aspects that do show up in the Martian Chronicles are pretty straightforward in the sense that Bradbury is telling us, all the science in the world is not going to save you. And in fact, when you consider that, especially when Bradbury's writing that the atomic bomb was thought of as being, or the hydrogen bomb in those days, which was the next and bigger version, next iteration of the atomic bomb. The hydrogen bomb was considered to be the sort of the summit of what science could do, both for the incredible ability of humanity to invent things, but also the chance that we were going to wipe ourselves out. And certainly in the story we just read, There Will Come Soft Rains, I think that Bradbury is fairly clearly making the point that we can be as used to our mechanized, improved, almost effort-free life that our technology has brought us. But it won't do us any good if we don't solve the other kinds of problems. Obviously, again, Bradbury was writing about his own time, which is why the house and the house's routine, as he describes it, is very much that of kind of the 1950s, early 1960s. The idea of having the friends over to play bridge and, having a cigar set out for the man of the house and, all these kinds of things. But more crucially, I think, is that Bradbury is saying, we're not going to save ourselves with our gadgets, especially not when some of our gadgets are capable of destroying us, as obviously in that story is the case. And I'm not talking about the house. I'm talking now about the nuclear war and the destruction of humanity, or at least large amounts of it. So I think that's one of the really interesting things, is Bradbury is one of the few, not few, but Bradbury is definitely among the science fiction writers who don't particularly think science is going to solve everything. And in this story in particular, science isn't going to do anything except stick around for a little while after we're gone, which is a pretty sad thought. But it is one of these things that I've certainly been thinking about lately, just in the sense that whenever, one is feeling down about the current state of society or something, one does start thinking about, like, well, what are we going to leave behind? How are future generations going to look back on us? And so I find I'm not a pessimist by nature. I'm in fact rather the opposite. I'm an optimist. But there is a part of me that recognizes that optimism has a price. And one of the prices is that you are leaving yourself open to secretly feeling like, but what if I'm wrong? What if things aren't going to work out? And very definitely that's one of the things going on in the Martian Chronicles. It starts almost from the word go, with humans showing up on another planet and expecting to be celebrated. And first they're killed, then they are treated like crazy people and killed. And then they are killed by their own comrade, who sees that humanity is going to ruin Mars. So it is a rather, especially when you consider that Heinlein was, without much satire, was writing things like Starship Troopers. At this time, Bradbury is in his own quiet way is poking fun at the idea of, American supremacy and humanity firstism, and aren't we splendid, and isn't science wonderful, and aren't we going to make of the universe a wonderful place in our own image? And yet, from the very moment that the Americans show up, or the Americans in this case, but the humans in general show up on Mars, first they are obliterated, and then when they do finally manage to take it over, they make an absolute god-awful mess out of it, fill it full of hot dog stands and neon lights and things like that. While at the same time we do see the humanity of some of these people as well. So Bradbury is not just
using a broad brush to make all humans look like idiots. And he sees the points of connection between the humans and the Martians they have replaced. So one of the things that I think always did fascinate me about this story is this idea that not only is science not necessarily going to fix everything, but it may be the cause of what goes wrong, but whatever else it is, it may also be the last trace that we leave behind, which is a rather sobering thought, I think. Okay, so I warned you guys I was going to cut out early tonight when I finished the story, and I have now finished the story. So I will be back tomorrow night, and we will, or later tonight, and we will read the last story, and I will do my summing up, and then try and figure out what we're going to do next with this reading slot. So, with that, I thank you for your patience and for this slightly weird weekend setup. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, one way or the other. And I hope you will all take very good care of yourselves. That's important. Take good care of yourselves first, because you have to be in good condition to help take care of the other people that you care about. Keep an eye out for people that may not obviously need a helping hand, but could use a kind word, a smile, something, because everybody's fighting their own battles. And with that, I will say again, thank you for joining me. Peace, be well, and I will see you very soon.